Happy Friday, everyone. Good morning. It's Friday, September 16th, and we are back in the studio. So excited to be here. Bea, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited to be doing this again. I missed you too. So we are back here. It's been a little while since we last shot, I would say a couple months. We took some time to reflect individually and also together as partners in this incredible venture. And as we look back to the last 6 episodes that we did, I think we had incredible guests with us who were not only phenomenal agents, you know, either real estate brokers or mortgage brokers, but they were also incredible humans that are doing so many amazing things for themselves, for the communities they serve, and for their families. So
one would even say they are great leaders.
Yeah, they definitely are. And I think maybe that's why we were drawn to those individuals. So speaking of leaders, Bianca and I have actually decided to kind of have themes for our episodes and what we'll be discussing. So we came together this summer. We kind of looked back at what we did for the last 6 episodes. We're like, okay, so what's our next step? How are we moving forward with this? Who do we want to have on the pod? And what are the things that we want to talk about? So we came together and Bianca had a genius idea.
Such a smarty pants.
She's like, Jess, why don't we take a look to see what's happening on Google Trends and to see what people are searching about and what people are inquiring about. And so we did that, and we came up with some incredible topics that we can't wait to discuss with our guests and amongst ourselves. And so Monday we had a call. We're like, okay, let's see what's going on this week. And we noticed that everyone was talking about football. Now, let's just share that we know nothing about football.
Very little, guys, very little. But
this episode is not about football. However, in light of it, you know, the 2022 NFL season starting, we thought about why people love football so much. I only know a little bit about it because I used to work at a restaurant and we worked crazy hours because of the season. But as we collaborated together and thought about, okay, why do people love football so much? There were some really, really, really prominent themes that came to mind, right? One of them being teamwork. Another one being leadership. We also discussed community and culture. So we thought that we would speak about these topics and themes because they're not only visible in the field of sports, right? We see it everywhere. And a lot of what athletes learn and the skills that they acquire from a very young age, and even not from a young age, even, you know, if they're getting into sports during their adolescent years. But we noticed that a lot of these skills are transferable skills and they can be taken into the world of business.
Business, work, relationships, personal development. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, so all of it. And so we figured this would be a great topic to talk about. And we're excited to have our guest join us next week. And he, I think, is an example of someone who's been able to take those skills acquired and apply them into his business and to continue even serving his community through that avenue. So without further ado, we're going to get into today's topic of teamwork and leadership and talk about what we think makes great leaders and why we're drawn to certain people and why we're drawn to certain teams. And we're also going to talk about it from the lens of real estate agents, you know, being part of teams, deciding how do you know, first of all, which brokerage to join? And then from there, should you be a solo agent? Should you work with a team? So on and so forth. So B, did you have anything that was, you know, as you were coming here that really was coming up that you wanted to talk about?
I think what I want to talk about is when you're looking for a team, whether it be an individual partner, whether it be in a relationship, or you're looking for a team in regards to a sales position like real estate, what are some of the indicators that would indicate that would be a good place to start before you get to be on the team, join the team? So when you're looking externally at them from a social media standpoint or from a word of mouth standpoint, what are some of the things that you would like to hear that would be a good indication of that being a good route to take?
Interesting you say that, because I have always been a huge proponent of, I wish there was a period, and it's not even in real estate, in any field, where you could just test the waters for a week to spend time with X person or X company to see, hey, are we in line with one another? And then from there, you decide whether or not you want to continue. And my best friend and I joke about this all the time. We're like, we wish there was a 5-minute check-in on a date. When you go with someone and you met online, you don't know what they're like in person. And instead of sitting there for the whole hour and a half or whatever it is over dinner, you have a little check-in. Hey, is this working? Is this not? Let's decide what we do. So I always wanted that in the world of like business or anything that you do. So when I think of that, what would be an indicator that would, pull me to join a certain team or a certain company? And for me, it would be someone who actually practices what they preach. So if you as a leader is encouraging to do something, right? I would think to myself and ask, are you doing that as well? Because it's very easy to say to do something, but if you yourself aren't doing it, or maybe you've already outgrown the stage where you have to do it, but if you want your people, your community to be able to do that thing, can you actually lower yourself to maybe their level? And I'm saying lower yourself, not in terms of a kind of person you are or vibration, just lower yourself in terms of skill level, because they're evidently not at your level. But can you put yourself on the same playing field as them? And can you do the thing that you're requesting of them? That for me is really, really, really big. And that's the one thing that like really sticks out to me.
What about culture? What's the company or the culture of the individual or the team that would attract you most?
Culture is so, obviously you know this about me, but I really love anything that has a community. And even this morning on the call, the 5 a.m. wake-up call, one of the members was saying how like there's just this feeling of, people care for each other and people want everyone to do just as well. And even though you may be in the same industry, but there's just the, hey, look, do you need anything? Let me help you out. So for me, that's very important. Like, we're all following our own path, but we're all there together and there's a lot of support. That for me is really important.
Sounds like you're talking a lot about vulnerability and being able to be on a team or to be in an environment where you can ask for help without feeling stupid or bad or wrong is probably a good indication of that being a good place to be. And somehow being one of the people that perpetuates that culture, which as a leader, admitting your shortfalls, admitting your weaknesses, and then asking for help. So I think asking for help as a leader would be, for me, a really good indicator that I would want to be in that environment with them.
So the leader asking their community and I don't want to say their workers or their employees. I don't like that. I think ultimately the title doesn't mean anything, but them being able to reach out and be like, hey, SOS, I need help. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Wow, that's huge. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. Because if we're going to talk about leveling off, coming down to each other's levels, right? The leader stands at the top, and then everyone that's beneath him, quote unquote, or her, they get to ask each other for help. But what about, like, if you really want to bring that person to this level and that we're all working side by side?
Right.
I would like to see your vulnerability, your weaknesses, and the sort of authenticity around those things, right? Because we're human. That would really attract me to something.
Keyword, authenticity.
Authenticity, that's it.
Yeah, I often feel when people are in those higher positions, they have to live up to a certain expectation or a certain description of how they ought to be. And oftentimes I find people aren't even in line with that, but they have to act a certain way,
which actually breeds a horrible culture, right? Because people most of us have an intuition about things, an almost like uneasiness when something's not going well or something's not authentic, knowing that authenticity is off when this person. So how am I going to follow what you're telling me to do if I'm sensing that you're trying to live up to a standard of perfection that you're not living up to.
Wow, you gave a lot of perspective. Now, I'm going to be paying attention to that now. Can X person ask for help, or have I ever seen them ask for help? So it's interesting because I started reading this book called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And for those of you that like to read, I highly encourage you purchasing a copy.
I just opened it up to like one page and was already sold. So I'm going to be buying my copy today, guys.
And so essentially, what I love about the book is in each chapter, you're learning about each law, as the author calls it. And after each chapter, he asks you to apply whatever you learned and to apply it to your life. And it really helps you understand, because oftentimes people don't like to read because they can't get connected with the information. But here it's you're reading and now you're applying it back to yourself. And one of the things that stood out to me in the first few chapters was that the author was saying that status and position does not equate being a good leader.
Elaborate.
So just because you have a title as a manager, or just because you have a title as a team leader, it doesn't necessarily, yes, which is status, right? It's a ranking. A manager is not at the same, I would assume, salary level as, an entry level employee.
Yep. So
status does not equate being a good leader in the sense that, and he explained this, and you'll read this, but he was saying that leaders influence people. And I'm not saying being an influencer, I'm just saying you have a natural ability to influence people and engage them. And managers keep systems and processes in check, in order.
Wow.
Right?
That's really, really
and it's not to say that
insightful.
some managers can't be leaders. Some managers are leaders. But I think what he was getting at, and what I'm trying to get at, is just because you have a certain title or status doesn't necessarily mean that you are a leader. And oftentimes people think they are leaders or can call themselves leaders because they have either been given that title or they've given themselves that title.
Which leads me to the other thing that is really important about this book. There's this, the one of the pages that I opened up on asks that, oh, look, I just opened it back to that same page, and there's no bookmark here, guys. This is awesome.
Don't show people.
Okay, that you can't see. But it does talk about asking those that are close to you about certain things, the places that you need to grow, and how to improve on those things. And I think that if you're a manager of sorts or a leader of sorts, one of the best things you can do is do a sort of character audit by asking the people in your life to speak on your character, because when it comes to leadership, for me at least, I think the most important, if there's a hierarchy of things that you need as a leader, which is irrefutable for me, like the book, is character, a good character. And that character would have to have integrity in it. And you don't really know that about, like, we all have a certain level of self-awareness, but a lot of the time we think either a little too high of ourselves or a little bit too low of ourselves. No. So I don't think we're always fully clear on the perception that others have of us.
Right.
And it's important to get that, because if something's not working and you're running a group of people or a team of people, and you feel like you're a good leader, or alternatively, you feel like you're a crap leader, what you need is a character audit.
I like that.
That's good, right?
Character audit. Okay, so let's think back to, you look like a very athletic person. I mean, I know what you were doing a long, long time ago, but I want to bring it back to maybe like elementary or even high school. Were you part of any sports teams?
No, and you know what's funny? I jumped from group to group, but I never really integrated fully into any group. And when we go back to doing the self audit, so I was on the spectrum of not integrating into groups because of a self-esteem issue at the time. Yeah.
So groups, you mean social groups, or even like that's
sports
inclusive
groups,
of sports too? I feel like I can see you as a volleyball player.
Yeah.
Okay, so did you ever dance? Were you ever part of any communities where there was a coach or there was someone who is leading and guiding?
Those are such great questions. I can't think of a certain place where there's been that at all, except in my adult life, which is being a part of a real estate team, being in a relationship, being like these types of things, but not in regards to that. Not growing up. I was a bit of a loner growing up.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I don't think that's a bad thing though.
No,
I think because now probably you can enjoy your time on your own without having to, seek energy or acceptance from other people. So you mentioned business.
But there's a lot to learn there too, right? Yeah. So if you've been a loner all your life, one of the things that has to do with this topic in specific is being responsive to being led. That's a really, really difficult thing if you've been independent, if you've been a quote unquote isolated person or independent, whatever it is. That ability to be led and to allow it and to let it what's it called? Not develop.
Yeah, flow, develop.
Yes.
It's interesting you say that because now I looked away because I started thinking, and that reminds me of dance. But because I'm always jumping from topic to topic, I will bring this up, but I wanted to ask you questions about the work side of things in terms of team and then partnerships, like a relationship. But let me just talk about the dance thing and then I'll jump to that. So being led, this is why I'm bringing this up. Because I've been
about being led.
Independent for a very, very long time, always. It was so hard for me when I started salsa dancing to be led.
I took classes too. Same.
You did. You took classes with Clifton.
Yeah,
and
same.
I was back leading.
He's like, you need to just relax.
Just be.
Yeah,
stop
just
doing.
let him lead you.
Yeah. That's
Difficult.
actually what one of my friends told me. She's like, stop doing, start being more. And so that's what I find. Like I was trying to do and I was trying to lead and I was back leading all the time. I was like, no, this way. And like, it's just, maybe also I was nervous. I was just learning. So like for me, that was comfort of leading. And that's what it was. That was a comfort space for me. And I had such a hard time. And then once I started to let go, like mentally and physically, and even just the way I would like hold someone's hand when I was dancing completely shifted. My dancing changed immensely as well.
So then it's true then that you could lead by following.
Yeah. I think you learn to become a better leader when you follow. And you follow people from all sorts of different levels. If I'm speaking on like the work side of things, but yeah, I think you learn so much more that way, right? And then you know how to be a better leader. And one of the reasons why I was interested in this book is because one, Joe brought it up during the call.
Oh, wow. The actual... what is the subtitle?
Yeah.
Follow them and people will follow you.
Yeah, I didn't even know.
Wow. That's amazing. That's literally what we're talking about.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
So I feel like I've naturally been leading often. And so I'm like, okay, so this is typically the space that I'm in, but how could I get better? How can I do better? How can I be better? And I thought reading this book would be good, and it's incredible. And this is the last time I talk about the book because I think everyone should read it. But there's one part that talks about the owner of Costco and his leadership style. And I have had friends that have worked at Costco for numerous years. And when I would ask them, because when I think of Costco, and this is my own paradigm, I would think like people just work there for a little bit and then you move on to, I don't know, another. But these people were like so loyal to Costco. No, I'm staying here for a long time. I love it here. And I never understood. And one of the things that one of my friends had told me, I used to dance with her, she said, they have really good benefits and they really take care of their employees. And I never knew what that meant until I read it in the book. And so what the author sometimes does is he'll give a description of someone, but he won't say who it is until after. And then you kind of start to piece it together to understand. And sometimes he'll say the person's name first and then he'll give the description. But as I was reading this and I was like, this sounds very, very similar. This is a Costco kind of thing. Yeah. And they were saying like, apparently the owner comes into all the stores, all the locations. And if I'm not mistaken, maybe this is coming from another book, but he wears his name tag just like everyone else does. Just like all the other people that work there. And he hosts parties for them. And so back to, coming to someone's level, like you are human at the end of the day. And if you don't have your employees or your colleagues there, like you may no longer have the success that you do.
When we're talking about culture, we're talking about this shift in culture. If you start looking at sort of the way that companies are operating, just like you're saying with this specific person from Costco, we're shifting this culture of being like a piece in the machine to being a very valuable piece in the machine, and being acknowledged for your individuality and your humanness.
Yes.
And the more that we do that, the more that we see these successful companies become more successful, and taking some of that money that they're earning, because without the people they're nothing, and investing it back into the people, back into the. Be so surprised how much people are willing to do for you when you give them even something just as small, which could be seen as big, but small acknowledgement of their existence. Just acknowledge their very existence, and most of us want to be loyal to whatever it is we're serving, as long as we're seen doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's so cool.
And I think that comes back to that first question you asked me. What would be one of the factors or the traits that leads you to want to be part of a team or to be working with someone? Mm-hmm. And it comes back to what you're saying. So with acknowledgement comes compassion, and comes asking people how they're doing, because ultimately I think we want to be heard as humans and we want to connect. And so if the person who is all the way up here can come down and ask how you're doing, how you're feeling, you're building a connection there, right? And automatically it's no longer, oh, that person with that title. You know, I've worked at certain places where I would be scared of the person who owns the company, because there was never a, hey, how's it going? What's up? How's this going? And you can learn so much about someone if you look at their socials, or even like sometimes what they wear. Like you could see if someone keeps coming with like a pair of different kicks every week, well, clearly they're interested in that. And even something as simple as like, oh my God, did these just come out? Or
just noticing these things about people.
and showing that you care, and that, they're not just a number. They're literally a human there that's helping to propel your business.
So now that's on a smaller, I don't want to say on a smaller scale, but on a smaller scale that works. But if you're an owner of something that's very large.
I like your earrings, by the way.
Thanks. They're little bees for bee.
Yeah.
Girl packs a sting, you know? So.
See my ADHD.
Yeah, it's good.
sorry.
Earrings.
Sorry.
Okay. So you see how like on a small scale that works. On a larger scale, if you're a leader and you want to create that same culture, what you need to do is get other leaders and disperse them in different parts of your company so that they're responsible for doing exactly what you just said. Because imagine, like, as your business grows, how difficult it is to manage, to speak to everyone and to be able to engage with them and to be able to make them feel special. If I have 700 employees, right? Like what's that book? From Good to Great? Is it From Good to Great, or it's a book about companies and what makes some companies great and some that are just good. They're reasonable, but how do you get to that level? And I think that when it comes to systems and like building out a company of thousands of people, you got to figure out how do you make people feel special when there's 1,000 of them, right?
Yeah. Because people want to feel like they're the most important person. Like they want to feel like they're special, irregardless of who's around. Like people like that feeling, right? So even if I agree with you, if you have to hire team leads for different parts of the company, then that would make sense, right? But I think sometimes the challenge is finding that right leader. And how do you know if they're a good leader or not? What do you look at? Do you look at what they've previously done, right? So I'm trying to bring this back to football, to teams, to the coaching. I know in dance, there were some teachers that I was absolutely in awe of because of how they were as teachers, you know? Yeah. And when I think of sports, I also think of like community. Community is really, really, really important, right? We join things and we're a part of something because we want to feel this sense of belonging. And
you know what I don't know if this is squirrel
go ahead.
Topic,
it is squirrel.
But what you basically said, what I heard was, I'm looking at, if we talk about these teams, we talk about the suffering together and going through some trials and tribulations, like training together, which builds that bond. and how important that is to be able to suffer together and to go through the downsides of whatever it is, the struggles together.
And so it's funny you say that because, and I don't think it's a surprise, but yesterday we were at our brokerage's fall kickoff and they invited, I don't want to butcher her name, so I'm going to make sure I read it properly. Her name is Jennifer, but her last name, Botterill, Botterill. I hate when I butcher names. I'm sorry if I did. But she's a Canadian former women's hockey player, and they competed in the Olympics. And so she had asked the whole crowd yesterday, she was like, how many games do you think we lost when we were competing against the U.S.? And everyone's guessing, oh, you lost 4, you lost 2. She's like, actually, we lost all of them. Wow. And then a reporter had come up to them and had said, what's going on? Like, what's wrong with you guys? And where do you guys think you're going next? And she had said that the one common thing that remained for all of them, irregardless of the fact that they lost, and they lost 8 times, was that when you look at the person standing to the left of you, each person had faith. And they knew that it doesn't matter if they lost 8 games or if they lost 2 games, they all had faith. And they all knew that even through the suffering, because there's so many emotions that go through that. Can you imagine you losing every game? You could lose the momentum, but they all kept the momentum because they knew exactly where they needed to be and where they wanted to go. And they were doing it together. And I think there's so much power in that.
So, okay, but eventually was there...
I don't know what ended up happening afterwards.
Okay, because I wanted to know if they got to a place where they started like winning again.
I think they did.
Yeah,
I think they did. But I think the reason why she brought this up was that she was saying, like, yes, there are challenges, and sometimes the going gets tough, and you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel,
and you keep losing or seemingly losing.
Yeah, but if everyone is on that same page and everyone has the same end goal, and the energy and the momentum is there, and everyone just believes, and they just know, they just have that knowing, they know they're going to be where they need to be. There's just so much power in that, and seeing how that comes to life afterwards.
Wow, that sounds like all the great makings of a romantic relationship too.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, because you spoke about the business side, and so before we get into the relationship, what was one thing that drew you to joining the team that you joined? Because I'm sure there was something that
I think when we look at whether it's partners or whether it's business relationships, we look at the person that we want to partner with as almost like a future version of ourselves. So for me, I saw Kate as a representation of what I can develop into, or at least close to. And so you want to be close to the image that you want for yourself, like the image, you know, you want to find people that mirror the future you. And that's how I chose that. Even in relationships, I've always been attracted to people that inspire me, that have some things that I don't necessarily have and that I want to attain in terms of personality traits or goals or characteristics. Yeah.
So do you find that when talking about your relationships, and I'm not even talking about romantic relationships, but even like friendships and stuff, what is one thing that, aside from them possessing traits that you may not necessarily have, is there something that you're drawn to outside of that?
It's interesting because it's like opposite attracts, right? So I do like people who are like me, but I'm attracted to people who are mostly the opposite of me. Yeah. I really gravitate towards exactly that. Again and again, it's the characteristics that I either don't have and want, or I don't have, likely I'll never get. But at least in our partnership,
yes,
my strength is their weakness is my strength.
Okay.
So
I think that's huge that you mentioned that, because what I personally think makes a great team, in team, it could be in work and in partnership, is when everyone has different traits. Like I'm thinking of it on the work side of things. Like imagine if everyone on a 5-person team were all good at one thing.
Yeah. The whole business would fall to the wayside.
Yeah.
Right? If you're just good at rapport building, if you're just good at sales, if you're just good at systems, how are you going to get around the rest?
Like, it might make sense in terms of personality wise, you guys get each other, but in terms of productivity and getting things done and like bringing it back to teams, like, you know, why in sports do we have, I used to play basketball, so I could just make reference to basketball, like a shooting guard, a forward, a center, right? Like, yes, you guys are all coming together with an end goal, but everyone has a certain strength and we have to work off of those strengths, and we need to nurture and we need to allow those people, I personally think, to flourish in those strengths that they have.
You just mentioned something that I heard in all of that was knowing your role. And when you don't know your role, that's when you have difficulty. And you could be presented with the best team or the best partner for you, but if you don't know your own role and what your end goal is within that role, you can't function on a team properly whatsoever. So you need to really have a good conversation with yourself and look at yourself and go, okay, what is my role? And what is it that I'm best at? What is it that I'm good at? Because I think that a lot of us are trying to fit into roles and we're not happy there because they're not the things that we're really good at.
We talk about that actually all the time. And so we started this podcast first week of April. So it's been a few months since then. And I personally think that we've both been still on our learning journey since then. I mean, when we started, we said the reason why we started this podcast was because we, like a lot of people that are probably tuning in, are still trying to find their place in the world. And it's not just finish school, start whatever it is you're doing and do that for the rest of your life. And so I think there's been a lot of growth on that end too. And like, I've been learning even through this podcast, even like running this podcast and all the back end things that we've had to do and the conversations we're having opened my eyes up to a lot of skills that I never knew I possessed. Right.
And you got a lot of skills because you got thrown in that water to take on those skills.
But that's what it is. You get thrown into the deep end and you figure it out. And so I'm going to bring it back to what Bianca said in her first episode. One of my students actually brought this up and he was like, oh, I love that advice to have courage and to do whatever it is that you want to do without, you know, like knowing what the outcome is. That's why I have a tattoo on my foot that says Dare Greatly. Brene Brown, she wrote a book called Daring Greatly, and it's literally having the courage to do something even though you don't know what the outcome is. But I took your advice and I decided to work solo. And even through that, and even coming to accept that that was what I wanted, because on one end I'm hearing you won't be able to do it by yourself. It's challenging. The industry is really hard. It's going to take you a year to get your first listing. All of that. And then I'm hearing, no, do it yourself. You got it. You got it. And so when you're you see yourself between these two opposite sides, you don't know where to go. And I'll be honest with you, and this is me being vulnerable, when I'm offered too many options, I get overwhelmed and I completely shut off. So that's why I don't look at menus when I go to restaurants.
Paralysis.
Yeah.
Same.
And when I go to a restaurant, everyone laughs at me, but I literally tell my friends, I don't look at a menu. I know what I like. And maybe I'll just ask the server if there's something new on the menu. I like to try new things. But yeah, too many options. I get overwhelmed. And then I just sit and I'm like, I don't know where to go. Hence why I ended up getting off Instagram for the last 3 weeks. And most people are like, is that really like that? And I said, yeah, because I needed to focus. I needed to be able to make my own decisions without having to hear so many different things and being influenced by other things. So
limit your options. Everyone says to find out your options and to find more avenues, but sometimes the answer is to limit the options that you have, because there's way too many choices out there and they are going to just drown out the actual thing that you're supposed to be doing.
And so, you know, I'm an options kind of person. I like when there's so many different things, but as I'm trying certain things, I'm starting to be like, okay, well, I'm going this way. Okay, so I'm going to close off whatever was here. Okay, now let me go down this road and let me see if something else pops up. Let me decide where I'm going. And so that's been huge. And have I found my place yet? No, I have not. But I think that's part of the journey that we go through. And I think it's so incredible. And you too, like in the last few months, you've had a lot of growth as well. You started to really understand yourself. And I mean, you can speak on that. I don't want to speak for you. But even building a community of people that you've had around you. And I think that's been huge too, to your own growth, right? So yeah, it's been very neat to try to kind of figure out where it is you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to be there. And yeah, so I wanted to talk about community because I think with sports comes community and people coming together to celebrate and to, you know, and I think that's a big part of running a business as well. I think in our industry,
celebration,
especially, in our industry, especially, like I think oftentimes people have this idea that your role is to make a shit ton of money. Like that's your duty as an agent. You're like, they come in there thinking like, this is what I'm going to be doing. And it's so beautiful to see agents who don't have that perspective, who are completely on the other side. They know they will make their money if they put in the work and if they serve. And for them, community is huge, right? And through there, they actually build deep, genuine relationships.
I want you to be more specific. It's very vague right now.
So the guest that we have for next week, for example,
yes.
I think, and he'll touch on this, but I think through his love for the sport that he played, he's been able to serve a lot in his community and to give back to his community and to just build relationships with people far beyond just the transaction of, hey, let me help you sell your home or let me help you buy a home, right? And maybe I admire that because that's something that I seek all the time. Like it's far beyond just the, okay, your total is, like I'm thinking out a story, your total is 1534 and you tap, right? Like there's so much more than just that. And I really admire people that are able to do that. And for some, it's very easy to do that. And for others, you have to work on that. But at the end of the day, what if it's a community in terms of a team that you're a part of or people that practice the same, religion and even a family, that's community, right? At the end of the day, we want to be around people that think the same way that we do and that value and cherish the same things that we do.
I was waiting for that word because values are so important. And if you don't have those, if you don't know your own values, you're not going to be able to find the right team, the right partner, the right business, the right anything to get involved with. Values are very, very important, and discovering them is very, very important.
And discovering if they're actually your values or if they're your parents' values or your friends' values. Because right as you said that, I'm like, okay, next time I speak to a teen, I love working with young minds, I'm going to ask them what they value. And what they'll probably say are things that likely I feel like their parents would say because that's what they know, right? Like if you ask 15-year-old Jess what I valued, I probably would tell you I would value family would be my number one. Then I would value good marks. I'm just thinking about myself like
as a kid.
Yeah. But then if you ask me now at 28 years old, look, I mean, I can't, maybe if we go back to me at 15, I would say more than two things. But right now I can like list you a whole bunch of things that I value because I've done that work and I've understood what do I really genuinely value? And a lot of those things I value aren't necessarily things that my parents value, right? So for me, I really value happiness. I want to wake up every day and I want to feel good. I don't want to go back to sleep because I'm resisting something and I'm avoiding something. I want to feel happy. Okay, so how do I measure happiness? And my happiness, I measure it in different ways than, for example, my parents would measure it. You know, my parents would probably say, as long as I'm giving to my kids, then I'm happy because I'm playing my role as a parent. And I would challenge that. And I would say, well, then you're giving everything of you. You're pouring out your whole cup. You have nothing to give for yourself. So I would challenge that. And I would probably say, I think it's okay to be a little bit selfish and to put yourself first before other people.
That's also different stages, right? So there was a time where, if we're talking parents, where they had their moments where they were able to put others, their own needs above other people.
Right.
And there's a season for each thing. And sometimes I don't necessarily agree with when you're pouring out of the cup. Maybe when you get to a certain stage after you've done your season of quote unquote self-care and selfishness in a good way, in a positive manner, that eventually, even as you're pouring out your cup, and that's the role, and we're talking about the value, right? The value of adding to someone's life that you care about, like a child's life, is actually filling your cup. and that it doesn't get emptied because that's your role and those are your values and you're actually being fulfilled by that versus seeing it as taking away from.
Yeah. And so once again, that all goes back to the individual person, right? And who they are. So, it's been interesting to learn these things. And I think values really bring people together. Ultimately, like if you think about it, oftentimes, and we live in Canada and I think it's incredible. So many different cultures. I love that. I don't think I would have wanted to be raised in any other country. I think it's incredible. We are exposed to so many different things, languages, customs, norms, food, music, dance, everything, right? And so, where am I getting at? Oh no, my gosh.
Oh, no.
I always have so many million thoughts in my mind.
It's okay.
Culture is being exposed to so much.
Well, actually, those different experiences get to help in your finding of your values and finding of your community, right? You get a lot of different. It's like being Goldilocks of life.
Yeah.
In Canada.
Yeah.
That's
it
like
is.
you get to try all the porridges and all the beds,
and you figure out which. Okay, so I remember. Scroll.
Yeah.
Often I used to hear like a lot of my friends say like I want to marry someone that's practices the same faith as me and has family from the same country. And I think I like to dissect and understand, okay, why do people say that? It's because oftentimes the values are the same. Customs are the same. Like if I walked into your home, for example, I wouldn't come to your home empty-handed. Same thing, like when you came to my house, you asked me if I wanted something, right? Like it's just, and so those are, some things can be taught and some things can't, right? And so I think ultimately like values bring people together. It just makes them feel more like home, right? So
I like that. Wow.
Yeah.
So if we were to sum up how to find the best place you can settle in on a team or in a partnership, I think what you just said was everything is where it feels like home and what does home feel like you, and ultimately that's where you start.
Yeah. And I think you know what that feeling is. Like people call it a gut feeling, they call it butterflies, they call it a knowing. Like I don't know how you would describe it. For me, it's my intuition.
Yeah.
And I think if we take it on a deeper level, that intuition is felt from God, like he's funneling, or she, or however you want to take it, through us and giving us that sign. Every time my stomach hurts, I'm right about whatever is happening. I went to Sky Zone a week after I came back from living abroad for 6 months in Switzerland. Everything was fine when I was living there. I came back a week later. I ended up going to Sky Zone. And when I opened the computer to sign the waiver, my stomach started hurting. I was like, and I was like, and I ended up signing it.
Yeah.
Within, I think I was there for an hour, but in the last 3 minutes that we were playing dodgeball at Sky Zone, I ended up breaking my foot. And I felt like that tummy ache, that little thing was like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? Or maybe pay attention to certain things. I feel like you're getting something
I'm hearing
right now.
some stuff.
Yeah. And so I every time that comes up, like I feel it, I know it, right? So typically, when you walk into a place, if you feel
that
good.
That happens with people too, right? Like 100%. How many people have you met where you're like, instantly before words or thoughts form, you absolutely know that there's something about them that doesn't mesh, and there's an inauthenticity there just in their very being that repels you.
Yeah.
Right? But
we can't ignore those things.
Still, how do we do that? That's the question. The question is, how do you distinguish that from just plain old fear, because we have all the motivation gurus and they're all saying, don't worry about that feeling. That's just you being scared.
Yeah.
Just go ahead with it anyway. So how do you distinguish what is fear and what is intuition?
I don't even have the answer to that. I don't know.
You just know.
So you literally just know. So kind of like this morning where I woke up and typically
you learn how to trust yourself. I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Learning how to trust yourself, because it's when you don't trust yourself that you can't distinguish whether that's fear or
not,
or knowing.
Like this morning, I was set to go to the gym before we came down here, and I already had written out what I was supposed to work out. But as we finished the call, I was like, I feel like dancing today, and it was just like the feeling. But I was like, no, I have to stick to my schedule. I have to da-da. And I was like, you know what? And it all came back to this, because this is the stuff we study. And it's like, why am I going to disregard my intuitive feeling that's telling me to do something? My body is craving something. I'm asking for something. So I went to the gym. The studio was busy. There was a class. So I just ended up going upstairs, and they ended up stretching. And then you called me. Mm-hmm. And so for me, stretching is movement. And I love that. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I guess sometimes you just know, even though you can't really explain it.
But you got to learn. You got to learn
trust that.
To trust yourself when it comes to that. And so if you're finding yourself in situations where you're always asking, you know, there's a lot of like psychological stuff here from when you're a child and how you're raised by your parents, and, you know, how you rely on them and all this stuff. It's trying to discover all that stuff and figuring out how you are able to discern your knowing from your fears, right? Like, what are your fears based in? Are they based in abandonment? Are they based in fear of the future? Are they, right? So you look at your fears and you're able to figure that out. And from there, once you know that, so for instance, if you're scared of looking bad or stupid, right? And then you don't go out somewhere, you get anxiety in your stomach and you go, oh, I'm not supposed to be going out today. You could mistake that and say, something tells me I shouldn't be going out. Mm-hmm. But really it's that underlying fear of rejection that keeps you from going out. So it's
essentially, you have to trust yourself in what you feel.
By doing the really difficult work of seeing what your core fears are. And then always putting those up against the thing that you're having that intuition about. Mm-hmm. And go, okay, is this a fear that I have about that thing that I know that I've always been scared of? Or could this actually be an intuitive thing? Okay. No, I don't think so. This is intuition.
This is intuition. Yeah. Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, that's what I do.
See, we didn't plan on going there, but sometimes it just happened. We just go
happened.
there.
Yeah.
So there was a question I kind of wanted to wrap us up with, and Bianca had sent me some incredible questions that I thought we would discuss. And there was one you had asked, how can we seek out the right partnerships in business and in life for our greatest chances of success? So what would you say to someone who's like, yeah, I want to be successful, I want to be in a good place in my life, but I just don't know where to start? Like, how do I seek those partnerships? I want to be part of a team, but I just don't know how to start, where to start. Like, what would you say to someone in that position?
Oh, read the question again.
How can we seek out the right partnerships in business and in life for our greatest chances of success?
We talked about all those things. We talked about value. We talked about character. We talked about intuition. And we talked about knowing your own core belief system so that you're able to distinguish that from fact and fact or fiction, reality or non-reality. I think that last thing that's left is what I would say about relationships. This is when somebody asks me about, you know, when you hear all these people complaining about there just aren't that many good women, there aren't that many good men left, all this stuff. We hear this constantly, right?
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, they don't exist. They're just not around. I think that when we start saying that about, let's say, partnerships or work, and we just go, you know, like, nobody knows how to work hard anymore. Nobody knows how to do this anymore. Or whatever excuse you have for, if it's in a negative framework, I think that it's a place to look and to discover what it is about you that needs to change to be able to get that thing. So in a relationship, for instance, there are no good women, there are no good men. Wrong. Who do I have to become to attract that person? Like, what parts of me have to literally die so that I can start bringing that into my life? And before you find any partnership of any sort, I think ultimately you need to ask, what parts of me need to die for this to come alive?
Essentially, it's saying, who have I been to have attracted these people? And essentially it's the whole idea of what offends you reveals you. So if you're thinking that, you know, there's no good guys or no good girls or however people identify themselves, well, then look back at yourself.
Yep.
How are you acting? How are you treating other people? Because you're attracting those people for a reason. So I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's funny because that was always my theme. Like, oh, there's no good people. I have such incredible male figures that I always compare people to. And you know, I probably shouldn't be, but I have phenomenal people in my life. And I was always attracting people that were emotionally unavailable and could not talk about their emotions and were not vulnerable. But now I'm laughing because when I think back to it, like that's the biggest challenge I've had. And as of recent, I've been attracting people that are so honest, regardless of whether they're saying something kind or maybe something that's like feedback, so vulnerable and so open. And it's because I've been working on that myself. And I remember we were on a call and Bianca finished a call and you were like, I don't know, we were disagreeing with something, which is fine. You know, we're collaborating, working on something. And then she finished the call saying, you're such a good communicator.
Yeah.
And I'm working on that, you know, and it's so interesting that you say that. So yeah, I totally agree with you.
But it's also, you see, I saw that in you because I can take what you say and effectively turn it into something that's not criticism. So you're not criticizing me. You're communicating to me. Yeah. And so I would rather you communicate to me about anything so that I can start fixing things than to ever feel any other sort of, right? So,
but that's also because
I'm a good communicator. Yeah. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say is that because I believe myself to be a good communicator and I want to also be the kind of person that can tell people what I feel without them feeling rejected or criticized. I instantly want to be the same way with you or with other people. Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah. Communication is so important. And I think if we wrap this up, communication is such a big part of teamwork, being part of teams, you know, speaking to people. Ultimately, you're working with other people. And with the lack of communication, it's really hard to achieve a common goal, right? Clifton said this best. We're not mind readers. You know, he's like we aren't mind readers. We could assume, but if we don't ask, we don't know. Right. And so I'm going to actually wrap this up with one of my mom's favorite sayings. And the quote is, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And the reason why I want to bring this up is because, you know, if there is a team that you're interested in and you're curious, but they may look like they're unreachable or they're too high of status or whatever that is. I always encourage people to just do it. Reach out, ask. You never know, because by not asking, you're already giving yourself zero opportunity, and you never know who you can come into contact with and what kind of relationships you can build. And I think that's something that Bianca and I have gone through. It was a simple conversation. I sat down beside her on a couch, and now we're doing a podcast, which is so phenomenal, makes my heart so whole. And Bianca talked about, and we had a call, masterminds, and the power of bringing minds together to create
magic,
literally magic.
Yeah. The last, very, very last thing is something I listened to on YouTube it's this realtor that helps like Americans with like expireds and stuff. And he's trying to conquer cold calling. He says, the one thing I tell myself is if I make this phone call and I end up with nothing, what do I have? The exact same nothing I had when I picked up the phone. So I'm quite literally not losing anything that I didn't have. Yeah. And so that's what my advice is when it comes to seeking out the teams that you might be afraid of seeking out, and partnerships is you are where you are now, and the worst thing that could happen is that you'll be exactly where you are.
Yeah. And so this goes to the adults in our lives and in our community, in our sphere, and even the younger minds. Just don't be afraid to do whatever feels right in the inside, you know, that knowing. So yeah, thank you for joining us on our 7th episode of the Find Your Place podcast. Actually, wrap us up with a one-liner. I have a question. I really want to ask you this and I forgot, guys. Okay. I lied.
Oh sorry. They're all just like waiting for it to end.
At this point, okay. Sorry. We don't see each other often. How will you know that you found your place?
How would I know that I found my place?
How will you know when you found your place?
Oh my gosh. You can put me on the spot. We could have talked about this before. And
if you have to ponder, then we'll get back to us the next episode.
Oh man.
Start us off with this in our next episode.
No, wait, what about you? Do you have the answer to that?
How will I know that I found my place? Yeah, I think when I'll have a calm mind. Mind that's not racing 24/7.
You just
was that you too?
Nail on the head. As soon as you said it, I was like, peace. I know I found my place when I'm finally at peace.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, guys. Calm mind and peace. We hope you all find that as well, or already have that. And if you do, that's friggin' amazing. We will see you in our next episode with our incredible guest. And we look forward to connecting with you all. Have a great one.
Bye, guys.